Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into something really crucial for any organization looking to make big changes. We're talking about the strategy to execution framework, your guide to turning, well, those big ideas into a reality.
That's right. It's all about closing that gap. You know that gap, right? Between those brilliant strategies everyone comes up with and, well, actually seeing them come to life, in the real world. And that's even more crucial in today's crazy, fast-changing business world, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're using the Strategy to Execution Framework introduction from the International Institute of Business Analysis. Think of it as our roadmap for this deep dive. It's for anyone who wants to make a real transformation happen, whether it's, digital, like going all in on tech, or maybe a service overhaul, or even a complete culture shift. This framework, it's here to help.
It's like having a blueprint for navigating all those complexities that come with transforming a business.
I like that, a blueprint. So let's start with the foundation. What exactly is strategic business analysis? I mean, it's got to be more than just, sitting around and brainstorm ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's about really understanding your business, like inside and out, the context, the challenges you face, the competitive landscape. It's like it's like taking a really thorough inventory of your whole business ecosystem.
So you're saying before we even start thinking about solutions, we need to understand the problem, what was it, the playing field, and what we actually want to achieve.
Exactly. You're laying the groundwork for a really targeted and effective transformation strategy.
That makes sense. But, okay, here's my question. Why do so many companies just skip this step? I've seen it. They rush into implementation without doing the strategic groundwork, the thinking part.
Well, it's tempting to jump right in. Everyone wants to see results like yesterday. But imagine you're building a house, but without a blueprint, you're bound to run into problems. Structural problems, costly rework, delays. It's a mess.
It's like you end up with a house that looks nothing like what you pictured, right?
Exactly. Invest in time in strategic business analysis. That's like laying a strong foundation. It's about thinking deeply before you jump into action.
Okay, so that brings us to the idea of a growth mindset, right?
Mhm.
The source material, it emphasizes this as like a key element of this whole framework thing.
Absolutely. A growth mindset, it's essential for navigating all the complexities of strategic business analysis and making it work.
So it's not just about sticking to a rigid plan, but being adaptable, open to new information.
Yeah,
Yeah.
precisely. It's about constantly learning, adapting, incorporating new information as it comes up. It's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth and being open to, well, to having your assumptions challenged.
I can see how that's so valuable, especially now the business landscape's always changing. You need to be able to pivot, adjust your strategy based on what you learn.
Exactly. A growth mindset, it keeps you agile, responsive to change, and that's crucial for any kind of successful transformation.
Now, the source material, it also highlights this idea of business change-led delivery. Can you break that down for us? What does it actually mean and why is it so important?
It's about empowering business leaders, giving them the reins to really champion and manage the transformation. They're the ones closest to the core business needs and can make informed decisions quickly.
So instead of it being a top-down approach, it's more about giving the folks on the front lines, the ones who really get how the business works, the authority to make the changes happen.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of ownership and accountability within the whole organization, leading to more effective and sustainable change.
I'm following you.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go any further, I think it's a good idea to define some of those key terms from the source material, clear up any jargon.
Great idea. Jargon, it can definitely get in the way of understanding something. So let's define some of the key terms that we're going to be using throughout this whole deep dive.
The document highlights business as usual, business change-led delivery, which we just touched on, business problem, and core business problem. There's a lot of business in there.
Yeah, a lot of business going on. Well, let's start with business as usual. This one's pretty straightforward. It just refers to the day-to-day operations of things that keep the lights on, so to speak.
All right, that one's easy enough.
Yeah.
Now, what about business problem?
A business problem, that's any issue. It could be strategic or tactical, anything that's preventing your organization from reaching its goals. It's an obstacle,
So it could be inefficient processes or decline in market share, anything like that.
Exactly. And then we have the core business problem. Now, this one goes deeper. It's about the root cause, the underlying issue that if you solve it, would unlock, significant positive change, like across the whole organization.
So like finding that one domino that if you knock it over sets off a whole chain reaction of good stuff?
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding the most impactful lever for change.
Okay, now that we've got those key terms sorted out, let's talk about the skills, the competencies you need to make this whole framework thing actually work.
The source material, it outlines several fundamental competencies for successful strategic business analysis. These go beyond the typical, analytical skills you might think of.
Oh, okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of competencies are we talking about?
We're talking design thinking, facilitation, lateral thinking, observation, rapport building, sense making and sense given, and visualization.
That's quite a list. It's like a mix of analytical skills, creative skills, and the interpersonal skills. Is there one that you find people struggle with more than others?
One that often gets overlooked is sense making and sense given. It's not just about gathering data and analyzing it. It's about interpreting that data, making sense of it, and then, this is important, communicating those insights in a way that resonates with people.
Ah, so it's about being a storyteller, connecting the dots between data and human experience.
Exactly. You need to be able to translate all that complex information into something compelling, something that inspires action.
You got to bring people along on the journey, not just hit them over the head with numbers.
Right. Now, this brings us to another crucial aspect of the framework: the 9 key considerations outlined by the International Institute of Business Analysis. These, well, they're like the building blocks for guiding your organization through a successful transformation.
Okay, so this is where we really start seeing the framework taking shape. Let's dive into those 9 key considerations then, let's start with program strategy. What are the essentials when you're developing a solid program strategy for a transformation?
Well, just like the source material says, a well-defined program strategy, it clearly spells out the business problem, the one we're tackling, and outlines those desired business outcomes. It's like setting a compass and making sure everyone knows where we're headed.
It's like begin with the end in mind kind of approach, right? Knowing where you want to go before you figure out how to get there.
Exactly. And understanding the scope of the transformation is key too. What parts of the business are going to be affected? Which processes need change in? What new capabilities do we need?
It's like defining the boundaries of your project
Yeah.
and anticipating how it might ripple through the whole organization.
Exactly. Once we have that clarity, we can map out the specific initiatives within the program, the actionable steps that take us from where we are now to where we want to be.
It's like breaking down a big complex project into, manageable chunks. Each initiative contributes to the overall goal.
Right. And each initiative, it should have its own set of objectives, deliverables, timelines, all feeding into the big picture.
All right, so we've got a good grasp on program strategy, the scope, and the individual initiatives. Now let's move on to, sponsorship and governance. Why are these so important for a successful transformation?
You can have the best strategy in the world, but without strong sponsorship and effective governance, it's likely to fail.
So it's not enough to just have a plan. You need the right people and the right structures in place to drive it forward.
Exactly. Sponsorship means having those influential leaders who are really championing the transformation, advocating for it, and providing the necessary resources.
They're like internal cheerleaders, clearing any roadblocks and making sure the transformation stays a top priority.
Yeah, a strong sponsor, they're invested in the success of the transformation. They're willing to go the extra mile.
Got it. And what about governance? What's its role in all this?
Governance provides the structure, the processes to keep the transformation on track and, well, to deliver those intended outcomes. Think of it as setting up the rules of the game, defining roles, responsibilities, establishing decision-making mechanisms, implementing systems to track progress. It's about keeping things moving in the right direction.
So it's about accountability and transparency throughout the whole process, making sure everybody's on the same page and working towards the same goals.
Exactly. Effective governance ensures timely decision-making, that everyone's informed, and that we're mitigating risks. It's also about efficient resource allocation, making sure everything's running smoothly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the source material, it also highlights this idea of stakeholder strategy. It seems like this framework puts a lot of emphasis on stakeholder engagement throughout the entire transformation process. Why is that?
Well, stakeholders are anyone who has a vested interest in or will be affected by the transformation, whether they're employees, customers, suppliers, partners, even members of the community. Engaging them effectively is absolutely crucial for building buy-in, managing any resistance, and making sure the transformation meets everyone's needs.
So it's not just about telling people what's happening. It's about actively involving them, making sure their voices are heard.
Exactly. It's about building relationships, understanding their perspectives, addressing concerns, really incorporating their feedback.
This sounds like it requires some serious communication and collaboration skills. How can we make sure we're engaging stakeholders in the right way?
The source material, it suggests a few strategies. First, identify all the key stakeholders and figure out their level of influence and interest. Then develop a communication plan, outlining how and when we'll communicate with different groups. We got to use different channels to reach different audiences and create opportunities for feedback and dialogue. It's about making it a two-way street.
It sounds like a very proactive and strategic approach to stakeholder engagement, not just a one-time announcement, but an ongoing conversation.
Exactly. Effective stakeholder engagement is an ongoing process, requires consistent effort, got to pay attention to it, build trust, and make sure everyone feels heard and involved.
Okay, so far we've covered program strategy, sponsorship and governance, and stakeholder strategy. What's next?
Execution roadmaps. This is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
So we've got the plan, the support, the stakeholders on board. Now we need to figure out how to make it all happen.
Exactly. Execution roadmaps are, well, they're the detailed plans that outline how we'll actually implement the transformation. They break the whole program down into specific phases, milestones, activities, with, clear timelines and assigned responsibilities.
So they're like the blueprints that bring the strategy to life, guiding the day-to-day execution.
Exactly. They provide that structure and clarity you need to keep everyone aligned and moving forward in a coordinated way.
What are some key elements that need to be included in a really effective execution roadmap?
Well, the roadmap should clearly define the scope of each phase. The key activities, the dependencies between activities, the resources required, timelines for completion, and the metrics that will be used to track progress. Got to keep our eyes on the prize.
It's about breaking down the transformation into manageable steps with clear ownership and timelines for each step.
Precisely. A well-developed execution roadmap, it provides a shared understanding of what needs to be done, who's responsible, and when it needs to be finished. That helps to ensure the transformation stays on track.
It's all coming together now.
Okay, so let's move on to another crucial element, the business case. Why is this so important in the grand scheme of things?
The business case. It's the justification, the rationale for the whole transformation. It outlines the expected benefits, the costs, the return on investment. It's the document that convinces stakeholders why this transformation is worth investing in.
It's like the sales pitch for the transformation, right?
Yeah.
You're making the case for why it's a smart business decision.
Exactly. A well-crafted business case clearly spells out the problem, the solution, the expected benefits, the costs, the risks, mitigation strategies, and the overall return on investment. It's got it all.
What are some key things to keep in mind when you're developing a truly compelling business case?
Well, first and foremost, it needs to be aligned with the organization's strategic goals. Got to show how this transformation will contribute to the bigger picture.
It's about connecting the dots between the transformation and where the organization's headed. Exactly. It's also crucial to be realistic, about the benefits and the costs. Transparency and credibility, that's how you build trust with your stakeholders.
You're saying present a balanced view, acknowledging both the rewards and the risks involved.
Precisely. And don't forget about those non-financial benefits, things like improved customer satisfaction, employee engagement, enhanced brand reputation. Those things are valuable too, even if they're a little harder to measure.
It's about looking at the transformation holistically, its impact on the entire organization.
Exactly. Okay, now let's move on to, source and strategy. How does this fit into the strategy to execution framework?
So we've got a solid plan and a compelling business case. Now we need to figure out how to get the job done right.
Exactly. A source and strategy outlines how we'll acquire the resources, expertise, technology, everything we need to actually implement the transformation. This could involve using internal resources, partnering with external vendors, or, most likely a combination of both.
It's like figuring out the best way to assemble your transformation dream team.
Precisely. The source and strategy takes into account things like cost, expertise, capacity, risk. For example, if we need some special skills that we don't have in-house, we might need to look for external partners. But if we've got the expertise internally but just need more people power, we might train existing employees or, hire some new talent.
It's a strategic balancing act, making sure you've got the right people and the right roles at the right time.
Exactly. And remember, this source and strategy, it's not set in stone. It might evolve as the transformation progresses and we identify new needs along the way.
Makes sense. Now let's talk about user journeys. We touched on this a bit earlier, but can you elaborate on how they contribute to a successful transformation?
Think of user journeys as a way to see things through your customer's eyes. They map out the experiences of different user groups as they interact with your organization, before, during, and after the transformation. By understanding their journeys, we can identify potential pain points and design solutions that make their experience better.
So we're not just implementing change from our own internal perspective, we're also thinking about the impact on our customers and how we can make the transition smooth and positive for them.
Exactly. Let's say you're transforming your online shopping experience. By mapping out the user journey, you might discover that the checkout process is confusing, or that, customers have trouble finding what they're looking for. This helps you make specific improvements that make the whole experience more user-friendly and enjoyable.
You're walking through the process as if you were the customer.
Precisely. User journeys help us anticipate and address those, potential challenges before they pop up, making sure that the transformation provides a positive experience for everyone involved.
Got it. So we've planned, we've resourced, we've considered our users. Now, how do we actually execute this transition smoothly? What's the secret sauce?
Well, that's where the transition strategy comes in. It outlines how we're going to move from the current state to that desired future state in a controlled way. It's like a detailed plan for implementing the changes, minimizing disruptions, making sure everything goes smoothly.
It's like conducting an orchestra, making sure all the different instruments are playing in harmony.
Exactly. The transition strategy addresses those key questions like, how are we rolling out the changes? Will it be gradual or all at once? What kind of training and support do employees and customers need? How are we going to communicate these changes effectively? It's about dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's.
It sounds like a very comprehensive plan, thinking about every aspect, from the technical implementation to communication and training.
Exactly. For instance, imagine we're implementing a new CRM system. The transition strategy would outline, the timeline for data migration, system configuration, user training, go-live support. It would also include a communication plan to keep stakeholders informed about the changes, and a training plan to make sure employees know how to use the new system. We want them to feel comfortable, not overwhelmed.
You're thinking ahead, anticipating potential problems like resistance to change, technical glitches, and you've got strategies in place to address those, right?
Yeah, of course. A well-executed transition strategy can make the difference between a smooth and successful transformation and one that's, chaotic and disruptive.
And nobody wants that. Now, let's move on to the last key consideration, and that is the change and adoption strategy. How do we make sure the changes we've implemented are not just adopted, but really embraced and sustained within the organization?
That's where the change and adoption strategy takes center stage. It's not enough to just, implement new processes or systems. We need to create a culture that supports those changes and reinforces them.
So we're going beyond just the technical aspects. We're really addressing the human element of transformation.
Precisely. The change and adoption strategy, it's all about winning hearts and minds. We need people to understand the why behind the transformation, to feel empowered to embrace the new way of working. This means clear communication, consistent communication, ongoing training and support, and ways to gather feedback and give recognition. We want people to feel valued.
We're creating a supportive environment so employees feel informed, valued, and motivated to adopt the changes. It's about making change something they're invested in, not something that's forced on them.
Exactly. For instance, let's say we've implemented a new process for project management, the change and adoption strategy. It might involve workshops to explain the benefits of this new process, training sessions to equip employees with the necessary skills, and regular check-ins to get feedback and address any challenges.
Sounds like an ongoing process. Communication, education, support. You're making sure employees feel comfortable and confident with the changes.
Precisely. A strong change and adoption strategy, it can really make or break a transformation. It's the difference between something that's embraced and sustained and something that's met with resistance and ultimately doesn't deliver those benefits we're looking for.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've really dug deep into each of the 9 key considerations of this strategy to execution framework. What are some key takeaways that you want our listeners to walk away with as they start thinking about their own transformation journeys?
Well, remember, a successful transformation isn't just about having a fantastic strategy. It's about bringing that strategy to life through careful planning, execution, and ongoing support. Each of those 9 considerations we talked about, they all play a crucial role in making sure the transition goes smoothly and is successful.
It's kind of like building a house, right? You need a strong foundation, a detailed blueprint, skilled people to build it, and a plan for managing the whole construction process from start to finish.
That's a great analogy. And just like building a house, a successful transformation needs meticulous planning, execution, and constant attention to detail.
And just like every house is unique, every transformation is going to be different, right? You have to tailor the framework to your own specific context.
That's an excellent point. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to transformation. It's about taking the principles of the framework and adapting them to your own organization, your culture, your resources, your goals.
That's such valuable advice. Transformation isn't a destination, it's a journey, right? You got to be ready to adapt.
Exactly. It's about continuous learning, adaptation, and, well, evolution, always growing and improving.
And that brings us to my favorite part of the show, the aha moment. What's that one thought, that one nugget of wisdom that you want our listeners to really ponder as we wrap up this deep dive into the strategy to execution framework?
Here's something to think about. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. This framework, it gives you the tools and the guidance to not just manage change, but to use it, to leverage it as a catalyst for growth and innovation.
Wow, that's powerful. So to our listeners out there, as you're reflecting on your own transformation goals, ask yourselves, are you just reacting to change, or are you actively choosing to grow and evolve?
Exactly. Transformation is an opportunity to not just change what you do, but to transform who you are as an organization.
Love it. And with that inspiring thought, we'll conclude this part of our deep dive into the strategy to execution framework. We hope this has been valuable and that you're now equipped to tackle your own transformation challenges with, well, with confidence and clarity. Stick around, though. We'll be back with part 2, where we'll unpack those 9 key considerations in even more detail.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So in this part, we're going to unpack each of those 9 key considerations we talked about, giving you some practical insights that you can actually apply in your own organization.
All right, let's roll up our sleeves and get into the nitty-gritty. In the last part, we were talking about execution roadmaps, but what does that actually look like in practice? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Imagine you're planning a road trip, right? You know where you're starting and you know your destination, but you need a map to guide you. That's basically what an execution roadmap does for your transformation.
So it's like breaking down the journey into those manageable stages with clear directions for each step.
Exactly. It outlines those specific phases, milestones, activities involved in actually implementing the transformation. And each phase, it has its own set of objectives, deliverables, timelines, all carefully sequenced to make sure things progress smoothly.
Okay, so it's not just like a chronological list of tasks. It's a strategic breakdown that considers, what needs to happen first, what depends on what, and how resources are allocated.
Precisely. So, for example, if you're implementing, let's say, a new software system, your roadmap might include phases for data migration, system configuration, user training, and go-live support. Each of those phases would have a detailed plan, outlining the specific activities, who's responsible, and the timeline.
This sounds incredibly helpful, especially for keeping everyone on the same page, making sure that nothing slips through the cracks.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to the business case. We touched on this briefly before, but why is it so crucial? Why do we need it?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. What makes it so important in the overall scheme of things?
Well, a strong business case. It's like the foundation of your whole transformation. It sets out the rationale, the expected benefits, the costs involved, the risks. It's the document that justifies the investment and convinces stakeholders that this transformation is, actually worth doing.
So it's like presenting a compelling argument for why this change is not just necessary, but beneficial in the long run.
Exactly. A well-crafted business case, it outlines the problem the transformation is trying to address, the proposed solution, the anticipated outcomes, and importantly, it includes a thorough cost-benefit analysis, weighing the cost of the transformation against the projected benefits, both financial and non-financial.
Right. So it's about demonstrating the value of the transformation, not just in dollars and cents, but also in terms of, well, things like improved efficiency, customer satisfaction, and even employee morale.
Exactly. And a robust business case, it'll also address potential risks and outline mitigation strategies just to assure stakeholders that those challenges have been considered. It's about painting a clear picture of the potential impact and providing a solid foundation for making informed decisions.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the sourcing strategy. Once you have that compelling business case, how do you decide the best way to actually acquire those resources, the expertise, the technology, all that stuff?
That's where the sourcing strategy comes in. It outlines how we're going to get those necessary resources to implement the transformation. It could involve leveraging our own internal resources, the people we already have, partnering with external vendors, or most likely a mix of both.
So it's like it's like figuring out the most efficient and effective way to put together your transformation A team.
Precisely. The sourcing strategy takes into account things like, well, cost, expertise, capacity, and risk. For example, if we need specialized skills that we don't have in-house, then we might need to partner with someone externally. On the other hand, if we do have that expertise but just need more, manpower, we might choose to train up our existing employees or even bring on some new talent.
So like a strategic balancing act, making sure you have the right people in the right roles at the right time.
Exactly. And one more thing, the sourcing strategy, it's not static, it's not set in stone. It might change, evolve as the transformation progresses and new needs come up.
Gotcha. So it's a live and breathing document, so to speak. All right, let's talk about those user journeys again. We touched on this earlier, but can you expand on how they contribute to a successful transformation? Why are they so important?
Think of user journeys as a way to step into your customer's shoes, to see the world from their perspective. They map out those experiences of different user groups as they interact with your organization, before the transformation, during the transformation, and after the transformation. By really understanding their journey, we can pinpoint potential problems and design solutions that make their experience better.
So it's not just about implementing change from an internal perspective. It's about understanding the impact on our customers and making sure the transition is smooth and positive for them as well.
Exactly. Let's say, for instance, that you're transforming your online shopping experience. By mapping out that user journey, you might discover that the checkout process is confusing or that customers have a hard time finding the products they're looking for. This kind of insight, it allows you to make those targeted improvements, creating an experience that's more user-friendly and enjoyable.
It's like you're becoming the customer and walking through the process yourself.
Precisely. User journeys, they help us anticipate and address those potential problems before they become, real issues. And they help make sure that the transformation delivers a positive experience for everybody involved.
I like it. It's all about empathy, right? Putting yourself in the customer's shoes. Okay, we've planned, we've got the resources, we're thinking about our users. Now, how do we actually make that transition happen smoothly? What's the secret to pulling it off?
That's where the transition strategy comes into play. It outlines how we're going to move from our current state to that desired future state in a controlled way, without causing too much disruption. It's like a detailed plan for implementing the changes, making sure the transition is as seamless as possible.
It's like choreographing a complex dance, right? Making sure all the dancers are moving in sync.
Exactly. The transition strategy, it tackles those key questions like, how do we actually roll out the changes? Do we do it in phases or all at once? What kind of training and support do our employees or customers need? How do we communicate these changes effectively? It's all about thinking through every detail.
So the comprehensive plan, considering all aspects of the transition, from the technical stuff to communication to training everyone involved.
Precisely. Let's say, for example, we're implementing let's say a customer relationship management CRM system. The transition strategy would outline that timeline for data migration, system configuration, user training, go live support. It would also include that communication plan to keep stakeholders updated, and of course, a training plan to make sure everyone knows how to use the new system.
So you're anticipating potential challenges like resistance to change or technical glitches, and you have strategies in place to deal with them proactively.
Exactly. A well-executed transition strategy, it can really make the difference between a transformation that goes smoothly and one that's, well, kind of chaotic and disruptive.
Right, and nobody wants that.
Hmm?
Okay, let's move on to that final key consideration, and that is the change and adoption strategy. How do we make sure that those changes we've implemented, they're not just adopted, but really embraced and become part of the organization's DNA?
Well, that's where the change and adoption strategy really shines. It's not enough to just implement new processes or systems. We need to foster a culture that truly supports those changes, make it part of who we are.
So we're going beyond the technical side of things and focusing on that human element of transformation.
Precisely. The change and adoption strategy is all about winning over hearts and minds, helping employees understand why we're making these changes, and empowering them to embrace the new way of working. This involves, clear and consistent communication, providing ongoing training and support, and having ways to gather feedback and recognize people's efforts.
So it's about creating a supportive environment where employees feel informed, they feel valued, they feel motivated to adopt the changes. It's about making change something they're a part of, not something that's, forced upon them.
Exactly. For example, let's imagine we've implemented a new process for, let's say, project management. The change and adoption strategy might involve, workshops to explain the benefits of the new process, training sessions to give employees those skills they need, and regular check-ins to gather feedback and address any challenges that come up.
This is an ongoing process, keeping the lines of communication open, educating and supporting employees so they feel comfortable and confident with those changes.
Precisely. A strong change and adoption strategy can be the difference between a transformation that's fully embraced and one that's met with, resistance and ultimately doesn't achieve its goals.
Okay, so far we've really gone deep into each of these 9 key considerations, and it's been really insightful. What are some key takeaways that you want our listeners to remember as they start thinking about their own transformation journeys?
I think the most important thing to remember is that a truly successful transformation, it's not just about having a brilliant strategy on paper. It's about making that strategy a reality. And that takes careful planning, execution, and continuous support. Each of those 9 considerations we discussed, they each play a vital role in making sure that that transition is smooth and successful.
It's kind of like, well, it's like building a house, isn't it? You need a solid foundation, a detailed blueprint, skilled people to do the work, and a plan for managing the whole process from the very beginning to the very end.
That's a great analogy. Just like building a house, a successful transformation requires careful planning, execution, and that constant attention to detail.
And just as every house is unique, every transformation is going to be different, right? There's no cookie cutter approach.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to transformation. It's about taking those principles from the framework and tailoring them to your own organization's specific needs, your culture, your resources, your goals. It's got to be a custom fit.
That's great advice. Transformation, it's not a destination, it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And you got to be flexible, ready to adapt as you go.
Exactly. It's all about continuous learning, adapting, and, well, evolving. You're always growing, always improving.
And that brings us to my favorite part of the show, the aha moment, where we leave our listeners with something to really ponder.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the strategy to execution framework, what's that one thought you want our listeners to take away?
Here's something to think about as you embark on your own transformation journey. Change is inevitable, but growth is optional. This framework, it gives you those tools and the guidance to not just manage change, but to actually use it, to make it a catalyst for growth and innovation.
I love that. So to our listeners out there, as you're thinking about your own transformation goals, ask yourselves, are you just reacting to change, or are you actively choosing to grow and evolve? It's a choice, isn't it?
Precisely. Transformation, it's a chance to not just change what you do, but to transform who you are as an organization. It's a pretty powerful thing.
It really is. Well, on that inspiring note, we'll conclude this part of our deep dive into the strategy to execution framework. We hope you found this discussion helpful and that you're, feeling equipped to tackle your own transformation challenges with confidence and clarity. But don't go anywhere just yet. We'll be back with part 3, where we'll wrap up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So we've really spent some time breaking down this strategy to execution framework. We've looked at the big picture and then, zoomed in on those details like execution roadmaps and transition strategies.
We've explored how this framework can really help you navigate those tricky parts of transformation, making sure all your hard work actually leads to meaningful and lasting change.
And don't forget, we've been using the Strategy to Execution Framework introduction from the International Institute of Business Analysis as our guide for this whole deep dive. It's a great resource. It gives you this structured approach to really tackling those tough transformation challenges.
Absolutely. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Remember the core business problem.
Ah, yes, the core business problem. This is where the real magic happens, I think. It's not about just fixing those surface level problems, the symptoms. It's about digging deeper, uncovering the root cause. That one problem that, if you solve it, would unlock, a ton of positive change.
It's like finding the keystone, the one that holds that whole arch together. You get that one right, and everything else just falls into place.
That's a perfect analogy. It's about focusing all your energy, all your resources on solving the right problem, the one that'll have the biggest impact on your organization.
So instead of getting stuck in those smaller issues, you got to step back and ask that big question. What's the one thing that, if we fix it, would just make everything else easier, better?
Exactly. It's about finding that lever, the one that'll create the most leverage for change.
This reminds me of the Pareto principle, that 80-20 rule, where 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes.
Yeah.
If you can pinpoint that critical 20%, you can really focus your efforts where they'll make the biggest difference.
Exactly. Work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah.
And this framework, the strategy to execution framework, it helps you do that. It guides you through that process of really deep analysis and strategic prioritization.
So to all our listeners out there, as you're moving forward on your own transformation journeys, remember this. Don't get lost in the weeds. Take some time, step back, analyze the situation, and really figure out what that core business problem is for you.
Once you've got that keystone issue figured out, then you can use the power of this framework, this strategy to execution framework, to develop a roadmap for real lasting change.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Turning those strategic visions into actual results. And this framework, it gives you the structure, the guidance, the tools, all the things you need to make that happen.
It's a journey. It takes commitment, collaboration, and a willingness to embrace change.
But the rewards, they're definitely worth it. By really embracing the principles of this framework, you can unlock the potential for huge EE growth and create an organization that's more resilient, more successful.
So as you're moving forward, remember those key takeaways from this whole deep dive. Embrace that growth mindset, empower those business leaders, engage all your stakeholders, and never, never lose sight of that core business problem.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to experiment, to try things out, to iterate, and to adapt the framework to your own unique needs and circumstances.
Transformation, it's an ongoing process. It's a journey of learning and improving. Embrace that challenge, and you'll be amazed by what you can accomplish.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the strategy to execution framework. We hope you found it insightful and that you're feeling ready to tackle your own transformation challenges, with confidence and a clear roadmap. And until next time, keep on learning, keep on growing, and keep on transforming.